Hi, everybody. Welcome back to We Are a Storytelling People with Cantor Evan Kent, directly from Jerusalem. If you are new to the class, Cantor Kent is on the faculty of the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. He made Aliyah with his husband, Rabbi Don Gore, in July of 2013 after serving for 25 years as the cantor at Temple Isaiah in Los Angeles. And I'm going to turn this over to Cantor Kent. Please unmute. Cantor Kent.
Here I am, unmuted. Wow. I want to thank you all for coming back, and we're going to continue our talking about our own stories, our own lives. And I wanted to begin talking a little bit about my own the show that I wrote, which is called Shards, which is called the Shards, putting the pieces together. But it's really about sort of trying to sort of deal with the pieces or the aspects of our lives. And as I explained last year, what happened was I made Aliyah in 2013. 2014 was the Gaza war. And I had to sort of reassess, with missiles landing on the perimeter of Jerusalem, like why I was here in Israel. And I am a lifelong, Reform Zionist. I believe totally in Israel, but I had never experienced anything as frightening as that in my life. And through a period of sort of self-examination and working with a storytelling coach who has actually turned into my director for the show, we actually we pulled together the show. But what I had to really understand is that why I was here and what I was writing the show and sort of what happened. Yeah, that's right. Cantor Lori wrote, I was there with you that summer. Yeah, it was a great summer. It was like, what are we doing here? It's like, it was terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But I was watching the Oscar Awards in 2017. So this is a few years after. It took me about a year and a half to write the show, and then I sort of workshopped it in bits and pieces. I actually went to Prague in the Czech Republic to do it for the Jewish community there. As an anecdote, they say for all these programs, we get 30, 40, 50 people. It was a day in February or March, and it was like 75 degrees after a terrible winter. So everybody preferred to go sit in the cafes and go to the park rather than see me inside a theater. So I did the performance to a very small crowd. But anyhow, Viola Davis won this supporting actress for her role in the movie Fences in 2017. And what she says is sort of resonates with the work that I do when we tell life stories. And she says, thank you to the Academy. There's one place that all the people with the greatest potential are gathered. One place, and that's the graveyard. People ask me all the time, what kind of stories do you want to tell, Viola? And I say, exhume those bodies, exhume those stories, the stories of the people who dreamed big and never saw those dreams to fruition, people who fell in love and lost. I became an artist, and thank God I did, because we are the only profession that celebrates what it means to live a life. So here's to August Wilson, who exhumed and exalted the ordinary people. And it's a very emotional thing. When I heard her read that, I was watching the Oscars the next night here because I'm not staying up till like 4 a.m. to watch the Academy Awards. I started crying because it's like she put into words what I was doing, which is to give life to my grandparents, my great-grandparents that I did not know very well. You'll find out when you see my show when next week, I think it's next week, when I didn't know my grandfather until I was 24 years old. And by the time I graduated from Hebrew Union College, 4 years later, he had died. So I've reconstructed my grandfather's life as best as I can. My grandparents were not very exciting. They were exciting people. Some of them were crazy people, but they were very normal people. And that is what it means to tell a life story, is to take moments from our lives that seem on paper very ordinary. But when you create a story around them, they become extraordinary. And that is really because we all have extraordinary moments in our lives. Every moment is extraordinary. But what we have to do about it is somehow bring it to life and make the ordinary seem extraordinary. And then at the same time, allow people to enter into our lives as storytellers and understand that what we are telling them is from the specific becomes general, and from the general becomes specific. So tonight we're going to focus on Passover because I walked into the market today and I'd never seen anything like it. Like overnight, stacks and stacks of matzah. Now, can somebody tell me how much do you pay for those big, gigantic 5-pound boxes of matzah? Those big cases. Cantor Lori, how much do you pay for that?
You know what? I haven't gone into the grocery store, but somebody told me there was such a bargain at Costco that you couldn't buy a box for what you could buy the 6 for. Has anybody been to Costco? Like, we're all like still ordering our groceries.
I don't. My mother tells me she goes to ShopRite on Long Island, and she says that with an order of about $150, you get the big box of matzah for free. So I will tell you that the matzah that my mother gets for free costs me about $6 or $7 a box with a small box here in Israel.
I think it's like $4 here for a box of matzah. Yeah,
right, that's not so bad. I am paying almost double for what matzah costs in this, and it's made like down the block from my house. So it's like it would be cheaper, Lori, for you to go to Costco, buy me matzah, ship it to Israel, and then I can resell it. And that's how I'm going to get wealthy finally. Anyhow, we're going to talk about Passover because it is amazing that Purim seems like it was yesterday, but it was 2 weeks ago, and Passover is in 2 weeks, and we're already making Seder plans, as probably some of you are. And we actually can have Seders here in Israel because a very high percentage of people are vaccinated, up to 30 people. Now, the thought of having 30 people at a Seder gives me sort of like an anxiety attack. I know when we lived in California, I maxed out at Seder at about 25 people, any more than, and then that was like with 2 people helping in the kitchen. This year Seder is going to be very small because I still don't want lots of people around the table, but we are opening up here in Israel. It's a little crazy, it's a little strange, and we hope that will happen for you soon. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to see tonight, what we're going to do tonight, or this afternoon, because this is more evening for me, morning for you. So everybody can see that? Storytelling session 2. So when we tell a story, we want to do one thing as we begin the story. I like to begin a story with the word so, because that sort of brings you in. It's sort of like, it's like I was speaking in the middle of a sentence, like, so, and it's like you're part of my world automatically. So I was sitting with my mother, or so, I was walking down the street, and it's like, oh, he's been telling me this for a while. But the next thing you want to do, and these are a lot of these prompts are from my storytelling coach and director, a woman by the name of Karen Golden, who's an extraordinary storyteller, is you want to open the door. Within seconds of telling your story, you want people to know where you are. So I was sitting with my grandmother in her musty living room, sitting with my thighs sticking to the plastic slip covers on her velvet couch. Within 2 sentences, you know where I am. So we're going to come back to this because we're all going to get a chance to sort of open the door. I was sitting on the bus from, I'm in high school, whatever. I mean, there are lots of places where you want to open the door. You want to open that door and take us to another place. Also, it doesn't have to be now. It was like, so I'm sitting in the sandbox at Chatterbox Nursery School and I'm 3 years old. And you automatically, in your mind, you see me as a 3-year-old, like with a big round head and big eyes, which is what I look like a watermelon. Okay, so here's the next thing. We want to use what's called thick description. And that is a way of saying, so when I walked into my grandmother's house at Passover, the smell of what? What did we smell when we walked into your grandmother's house at Passover? When I walked into my grandmother's house at Passover on King's Highway in Brooklyn, I immediately smelled the acrid aroma of 1,000 eggs hard boiling. I mean, and everybody knows, if you've been to Seder, you know that smell of eggs and haroset and horseradish. It just permeates the entire house. What else so that's important, thick description. So we also want sense activity words. What makes, what do we, it's not just enough to hear, but what do you hear? It's not just enough to see, but so I was sitting someplace. We were like, where could I be sitting? Michelle Hershey is on my screen. Michelle, I'm going to pick on you because you're on my screen. Michelle, where are you? We're going to use some places and words. Michelle, you're muted.
I'm in my savory kitchen where I love to cook and entertain for people.
So I'm in my kitchen with and what's a word that will make us see something?
Savory, or that's a sensory.
Yeah.
To see something. Surrounded by a delicious salad I can't wait to eat.
Okay, and the salad is the glistening salad with drops of olive oil cascading off of the romaine lettuce. We don't need a lot of description, but we need some description. What about touch? Michelle, what do you when you're standing in your kitchen, what do you feel?
Happy.
What actually good? What do
I feel? I feel the utensils. I feel the wooden utensils and the glass top, the smooth glass top of my cooktop.
Beautiful.
And
I feel the wooden handle, I feel the wooden spoon that my mother used to make soup. I feel it in my hand, something like that.
Oh, you want me to go to Passover?
You don't have to go to Passover. We're not going to Passover yet. We'll get to Passover. So often in a story, we like to have something called trouble is coming. And trouble is coming is what we call sort of the build-up. That the game Trouble has nothing to do with this, except it was a cute illustration. Trouble is coming. This is one of the things that my teacher and friend Karen Golden uses a lot. It's sort of like, so I'm sitting in my grandmother's living room on Eastern Parkway on the plastic covered brocade sofa, and the bell rings and the front door rings, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, who's at the door? And so all moments of suspense take us further into the story. So Michelle, you can say, I'm sitting in the kitchen, I'm making my mother's famous matzo ball soup, and I realize that something's wrong in the pot. Or I'm missing I'm missing her special ingredient. And you might not tell us what that special ingredient is until the end of the story. But when you say, and I'm missing that special ingredient, we're going to go, what's the special ingredient? We're going to wonder for the length of whatever that story is, what is your special ingredient? So let's go on one more. Hold on. These are examples of trouble is coming. Once, I'm driving along the road, and I decided to take that left turn that I never realized was there before. Well, I don't know what possessed you to do that, but you did it. And once I got up the nerve to walk into that bar, I met somebody. Trouble is when we do something that we don't share with the audience, we don't share with the people listening to our story exactly what it is. And this requires a little bit sometimes sort of a little embellishment of that story. And then the trouble is over. And then trouble is over where she says something like, and that secret ingredient was, what is the secret ingredient? I don't know. What did we put? And the secret ingredient, finally, I found that piece of garlic. I don't know, whatever the secret ingredient is. Trouble. And then she told me, we resolve the trouble. And then at the end of the story, this is a very quick way to tell a story. We're going to close the door, which means what we're telling people is at the end of the story, and as I left my grandmother's house, I knew that sitting on a vinyl couch would never, ever be the same. We like to come full circle. The advantage of, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. And when we tell stories, there's a difference between telling a story and reading a story. When we read a story, when we tell a story, the storyteller is inviting us. They're very similar, but when we tell a story, we're in the same space as those who are listening to us, and they go with us. We want them to enter our realm, and that's what storytelling does. It allows them to sort of suspend reality and to enter that same place, literally breathe the same air as us. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have us start to begin to create some stories. But I also know that last week, when I'm going to go to the full screen, last week, I asked some of you to sort of start writing or beginning to tell some stories. And I want to know, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the whole screen. I wonder if anybody came up with anything. Anybody want to share anything that they wrote? Anita, tell us. Anita, you're muted. It was a very soft and subtle story that you were telling us.
So it was last year, Passover in Boca Raton. And it was a very sad Passover because the only people in my home were my husband, my daughter, my husband's aide, and myself. And in our family, in the past, we've had seders in New York for 25 or 30 people. And then the next morning flew down to Boca with our accoutrements and an order at a caterer and had a seder for 45 or 50 people with my parents in the past down here in Boca. So for us, that was a sad occasion.
So, and let's Anita, we're going to use you as a guinea pig for a moment. So how could we open the door for that story? How do you set the scene immediately? How do you tell us? I'll give you a hint. I'm not going to give you
this during COVID time.
Okay.
And we were in Boca Raton, Florida. We were in beautiful, sunny Boca Raton, Florida, living by the beach where we could go out on the beach, actually, when everyone else was in quarantine.
Beautiful. So you give us, how can you tell us that it's a Seder that's a different Seder?
And yeah, my daughter's here with me.
What about if you said,
there she is.
hi, how are you? What about if you said something like, as I stood setting the table, I realized that I only needed four place settings or something. How that the box, something like I only needed, as I'm standing in the kitchen, I realized I only needed to make, even though I had 24 eggs, I only needed to hard boil 4. I mean, that says a lot.
Yes.
And that's so, and because then you've set up Seder for us, where it's like this year, as I stood and prepared Seder, I realized I only needed 2 bottles of wine. Because there's a sense of, by telling us what's not there, you've created a sense of loss. And you don't have to tell us much more. But then you can go into the story of the Seder. Anybody else have a bit of a story that they want to share with us? Michelle, there you are.
Okay. It's not so much you said to tell the worst. So I did a little play on that.
Okay.
Okay. We were slaves, we're free, let's eat. This summed up the feelings during our very first Seder abroad in London while visiting cousins. Our very first Seder, not in my home with 30 relatives. I've slaved for freedom. No cooking for days and slaving to clean. What a sense of freedom. Okay, so let's eat. My cousin Claire and I ventured out to shop for ingredients. Well, shopping in London for Passover ingredients is not like South Florida with all our fellow Jews. It's time to get creative. Shopping was nonetheless fun and interesting. My cousin insisted on making 3 boxes of matzo balls. Hence, that is 36 matzo balls for 7 people. Now, this is the cousin who made the heavy meatballs that sunk to the bottom of the pot, who everyone at my house said, who made the matzo balls? All righty then. We sit down to eat, and cousin Scott says, we were slaves, we're free, let's eat.
Beautiful. So I think what is a fascinating part of your story, it's what's your cousin's name?
It's my husband's first cousin, Scott, and then his wife, Clara, who
So
were living in London at the time.
So I'm with Clara walking down the aisle of, what's the name of the supermarket?
I don't remember. That was years ago.
So you go online, you look for a name, you type in London supermarket, and then you fill in the blank. Because it doesn't have to be, something, we tell stories. One of the lines I say in my show is, and it's all true. Well, that's how I remember it. And it's like, okay, my brother and sister listen to my stories and they say, what are you talking about? Did we grow up in the same house? And so the name of the store is, I don't know, whatever the name of the store is Piccadilly Shopping Market. And you say, and there's not a piece of matzah to be found. I mean, if you can say, and then there's something very funny about that you don't, and when you ask the woman for gefilte fish, you might be the only person in London. You feel like you're the only person in London looking for gefilte fish, which you might have been. So, so there's great opportunity to sort of set the stage, to open the door. You don't have to tell us. You can tell us what it's like to shop in London. I mean, that's actually a very funny, to shop for Passover any place except London. Except like Boca, what is very strange. I will tell you that when I first moved to California, my mother didn't believe that there could be any kosher butcher in California that was worth it. And so the first time my mother visits me for Rosh Hashanah, she says, I bought you a brisket. And so she gets off the plane and she has this large thing, that the second bag that is coming off the carousel, but out of the bag is like dripping blood because the brisket has defrosted and it is now leaking on the luggage carousel, and it's the size of like a head. And I said, we have to get out of here. We're going to get arrested. I mean, people think we're like taking like a dead body off the carousel. And it was like the funniest thing. We were so hysterical because, and my mother, there are no Jews in California. It's the second and the third largest Jewish community in the world. And so the scene of the brisket is like similar to like looking for matzah in London. I mean, that's actually, it's a very funny story.
I have to confess, I literally just wrote this while you were talking.
But it's good. But it's really good. It's a great beginning. Who else has a story that they want to hear? The best Seder, worst Seder? Susan. Oh, Susan, you're muted.
Okay. I was a newlywed living in Indianapolis. I had been hosting the Seders for my friends forever, but this year my father-in-law insisted that his son and I join him and his girlfriend in New Orleans for Passover. So we bought the tickets and did his bidding. Now, this highly touted Seder had no Haggadah, no Seder plate, and included bread, but no matzah. And perhaps the biggest faux pas was the absence of haroset. I was secretly horrified, but made the best of it. That's when I learned that for some people, Passover is all about gathering your family for a meal and not the ritual.
Oh, that's a great beginning. Oh my God, that is like, it's like a scene from like a sitcom. And you actually could say, the best part about that is that you don't want to tell us. You don't want to just tell us where you've been. You want to show us. And you could be sitting at the Seder table with this absolute look and say, and we talk in storytelling, we talk out loud. We narrate our own thoughts. And you say, oh my God, we're sitting here in New Orleans and I can't believe what's on the Seder table. There's crawfish, there's bread, there's beignets, and there's no haroset, which becomes a very, very funny story. But there's actually something, in a lot of our funny stories, there's something very poignant about it, because what we're telling you is that we're in a displaced place where we don't necessarily want to be, and we're craving what we had, and all I could wait for, is the haroset that I make at home, or something. We're with people, we're with family and extended friends, but at the same time, we really want to be in our own dining rooms, eating our own food. I mean, and that there's a poignancy to that, which I think could come out in that story. Somebody else. I'm so glad you did homework. Yeah, Philip.
It was about 8 years ago in New York City. I always had large seders for friends and customers who had moved to New York and had nowhere to go. And people were going to look forward to it. So what I would took a tremendous amount of food. If I had 12 people coming, it had food for 24. So the phone starts to ring about halfway. I was cooking for a few hours. The phone starts to ring, and it's one of my guests. They're sick, they can't come. 10 minutes later, the phone rings again. It's someone else. 3 of the people got the flu, and they're not coming. So I could see all this food in the kitchen, So the next call is from my past boyfriend, and he had moved out, and we weren't together anymore. But he called. He said he was Chinese. He said, "I love those Jewish holidays. Would it be okay if I come to Passover?" So I had all this food. So I said, well, who am I going to give it to? So I said, sure. A minute later, he calls me back. He says, would it be okay if I bring a friend? So I didn't know who the friend is. I said, sure, I got food for 25 people. So I'm cooking and everything. The people start to arrive and no one's there yet. And then finally the doorbell rings. I go to the door and there he stands with this guy who I'd never seen before. And the guy comes in, we sit down, we go around the table. I won't read the Haggadah. But, we all ate, we had a good time. So everyone starts to leave. I'm cleaning up, putting away 1,000 leftovers. And I suddenly realized that the guy was his new boyfriend. And I started to cry because I was alone in the apartment. I had 4 cups of wine and probably several others. And I was really a little bit tipsy. But I started to cry, and so the next day I started telling friends, but guess what happened last night? Who was that guy? And they said, I told them, they said, well, I don't think you'll be inviting him to any more seders. And I said, no, probably not. And so today he's still with the guy, but I have a younger, better version in Florida. So
very sweet story. I mean, there's so much potential there. There's sort of the funny element. I mean, Philip, I think if I was telling that story, I would probably make it so, I think there has to be, maybe you want a little fiction there so that you're expecting 15 people, and out of the 15 people, this one comes down with the flu, that one has a sick dog or something, and you all of a sudden, and then I actually once gave a New Year's party like this. Like, I invited the A-list. None of the A-list came, and all of a sudden the B-list shows up. And it's like, I don't even know who these people are. So it's like, you're sitting around the table. It's like, who's sitting here with me? And then as you're sitting there, you're going like, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Oh my God, it's his boyfriend. So you can actually be telling part of the Seder story and sort of figure it out. It's like, and then by the time the 4th cup of wine comes along, I mean, there is. So yeah, I mean, it's a very poignant story because we, one of the lines, we can actually use the line from the Haggadah, which says, we're supposed to invite even the stranger into our house, but I didn't think the stranger would include my ex's boyfriend. I mean, that's not in the Haggadah anywhere. So it's actually very funny, very sad. So I think it's a beautiful story. You have the great, the bones of a really nice story. Anybody else? And then we're going to break into some groups. Yeah, Barbara.
So I went to college in the Midwest, and I was in a town of 10,000, and there were 7 Jews. And college
That alone makes us all gasp. Okay.
Okay. There were 20 Jews in college, 10 boys, 10 girls, and it was 920 students at the school. And my friend Leah and I decided we were going to have a Seder. And we invited all the Jews, and then I invited my favorite reverend who taught classes, and we just opened it up at that point. And we had the food service manager let us use his kitchen, let us use the dining room. And we had this huge, huge table with lots and lots of people. And we gave out the Haggadah and we sat there, and neither of us knew what we were doing, because my experience in having Seders was going to my grandmother's house, sitting in the kitchen with the person who always helped my grandmother because I really liked her, and would come out, eat haroset, and go back to the kitchen. So my idea of a Haggadah, I had no idea. So we're there, and someone turned around and said, okay, so what are we doing? And I just turned to Leah and I said, it's for you to do. Go ahead. Okay, now fast forward the next morning, food service manager comes to me and said, was it successful? I said, it was wonderful. And he said, but you left something in the kitchen. And I said, I cleaned up, I did everything. They had 2 kitchens and the stove we were using was filled. I had to go to the back stove. I left, well, he showed it to me and he said, there's this liquid and there's like, it's got stuff on the bottom of it. I had made matzo ball soup. It turned into matzo pot, but I forgot to serve it. Of course, no one there knew it. We did, but that's my Seder story.
Is that the worst Seder?
Yeah, because the best for me, yeah. Well, no, there was one more where I went to my friends for 20 years. And there was one year where it said, we welcome the stranger and welcome the one who has nowhere else to go. And my friend's mother turned around and said, Barbara, that's why you're here. And I was devastated. Okay, so that was the worst. But having, the other.
That's an amazing story.
That was.
Let all who are hungry come on in and eat. Barbara, that's why you're here. It's like, oh my God.
Whoa.
So, it's actually a beautiful story. Barbara, where did you go to college?
Monmouth College, Monmouth, Illinois. It's not New Jersey, 180 miles southwest of Chicago.
I might begin the story with that. So I bet you've been to Monmouth. No, not Monmouth. I bet you've never been to Monmouth. Not Monmouth, New Jersey. Monmouth where?
Right, Illinois. Monmouth,
Illinois. Have you ever been there? I didn't think so. And if you're a Jew, you've probably never been there. I mean, it's like you're giving us this place like that none of us have been to, even though we think we might have been there. And I said, and have you ever had Seder in Monmouth? I didn't think so. I mean, so you're setting it up. You said, but I hosted the first Seder at Monmouth College. It doesn't have to be true, but it could be. And forgetting the soup. You know something? This is an example of trouble is coming. You say, and I put out all the food, and I knew that something wasn't on the table. It'll come to me. I don't know what it is, but it'll come to me. And then and then you can create a little fiction. And then at the end of the story, what could happen is that the Reverend could say, aren't you Jews famous for your matzo ball soup? I was expecting that tonight, or something like that. I mean, I can't construct the whole story for you, and I can, but there's something sort of like that is a great example of trouble is coming. Like, where? And it's always a good thing. I should do it in my own show, where there's something that's supposed to be on the Shabbat table, and I don't know what it is, but something's missing. When we say something is missing out loud to the audience, what does the audience do for the next 6 or 7 minutes they're listening to the story? They say, what could be missing? And and you could say, I put out the parsley, I put out the egg, I put out the corrosive, but I know something is missing. And, and that becomes your refrain. And then finally you come to this penultimate moment where somebody says, what about those famous matzah balls? Don't you Jews love the matzah balls? Or something like that. So let's go into breakout rooms for a few minutes, and we're going to use our first the first screen, which is, hold on. Open the door. I want you to open the door to take us to a time, a place when I was 5, when I was at Seder, I remember that Seder when I was 15 in Paris or something like that. And that's actually what we want to do, is sort of we want to try to play with that concept of, can you open the door? So, Ross, we're going to go into a few breakout rooms, and Cantor Lori and I are going to roam around, and we're going to see how we're going to open that door.
How long? Just so I know. How long do you want them in?
Let's do 5 or 6 minutes.
Great.
Okay, thanks, Ross.
Have fun.
Thanks. I'm muted. We are back. Everybody here? I'm gonna stop sharing. Stop sharing. Hello. Where did everybody go? We're all here. Okay. So can we all share my screen keeps moving. Can we all share very quickly how did we open the door in our stories? We had a couple that the time flew by. Anybody have any good opening the door stories or ways to do it? Anybody? I can't see you all.
So,
Michelle raised her hand.
Well, I think Margaret raised her hand too. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, put it in gallery view and you'll be able to see better.
Margaret can go first if she likes.
so
Okay.
I'm about 7 years old or 8, running up the steps to my grandmother's apartment in Virginia. And I had already been there the day before and watched her grind the fish up to make the gefilte fish. And I'm eager to come to the Seder because all the family's there and a lot of children, friends' children. And thinking about that afikoman, and I know I'm going to find it that night. And I sit through the matzo ball soup, and then there's the egg soup and the semis, which I would never touch. And we had a lovely meal and a savor, and now it comes time for the finding the afikoman. And we're all running around and looking under the sofas and all the places. And lo and behold, I do find that afikoman. I'm all excited. And I go up to my grandfather, and he puts out a penny. I'm appalled. I'm shocked. He had a great sense of humor. That was just the type of thing that he did always. I mean, obviously there was something that came afterwards, but everybody howled, when it happened. And that was a sweet memory because he used to do that often.
So, Margaret, you mentioned something in the beginning and you sort of went past it, but I think it was a very significant, poignant moment. And there were two people that sort of had supporting roles in this scene, and we want to know more about them. So you talked about your grandmother grinding fish, which most of us don't do. By the way, if you have not seen the very short film called Gefilte Fish, I recommend it highly because if you have, Lori, have you seen it? Have you seen the film Gefilte Fish? It's about how four generations of women share their gefilte fish. Yeah. There's something very magical about standing in the kitchen alongside your grandmother.
I did that. Yeah.
Yep.
Learning to make gefilte fish. And it smelled so bad. I said, I'm never doing this. And I said, you better teach my sister. And she was the one who took on that when she died.
Yeah. So, Margaret, do you make your own gefilte fish?
You are joking. No.
This is Boca, honey.
No.
My
Wait a
mother
second.
used to grind.
I have made
She
it.
doesn't do
I
that.
My
have
mother
made
wasn't even a cook. And we begged her. We begged for her to buy Manischewitz.
Okay, I make my own.
My
fish,
mom
okay?
actually made the best horseradish. It would clear your sinuses.
So Margaret, there's something wonderful about talking about what it was like to be at your grandmother's standing, watching her grind the fish, and knowing that she was preparing the best Seder ever. And why was that Seder great? Because look at this table. There's grandma's gefilte fish. You said you also had egg soup?
She used to make it. In fact, my cousin's in town, and we were talking. I'm having a Seder this year. He said, "Are you going to make the egg soup?" I said, "No way." He said, "Good," because I didn't like it either. I mean, I don't know what it was, but it was an egg soup.
They called it. Something. When you mentioned it, I sort of did a slow gag because my husband's grandmother used to make it. She used to call it Eggwasser, and it was like chopped up eggs.
Yeah, it was. That's what it was.
And I don't know why anybody except somebody like why would anybody eat this? It was disgusting. So it's like,
Well, the adults ate it. They liked it. We'd had two soups. We always had, Canadian and, and then you had the.
it's terrible. It's horrible. It's terrible. So there's I would think that something about being with your grandmother and making the fish, and then so this is opening, and then you have your thick description of grandmother's hands, her gnarled hands, and it wasn't a KitchenAid grinder, I'm pretty sure, right? It was a hand grinder, right? And what it was like, and the squeaking as it would go through, and then I don't like to write other people's stories, but the beautiful moment of finding the afikomen, and that Seder I found the afikomen, but what I really found was the recipe for what I really found was the love of Seder or something. If you actually made your own fish, I could say, well, I found the afikomen, but years later I realized I found the secret to good fish. You don't want to tell people that it's to buy the jar in ShopRite. So, but you could, but there's the image of creating memories with grandmothers or great grandmothers is a very, very powerful tool, and do not negate that. So yeah, other opening the doors. It's beautiful opening the door. Who else wants to open the door for us? Yeah, Michelle, and then Eileen.
Okay, I'm just writing something as we're talking. When I was 7, I remember going to my mom's favorite friend's house, Sylvia Gross. She cracked me up. I loved her company. My mom always invited her over to make me feel better when I was sick. And all I remember is laughing for Sylvia. She just knew how to do it. There were so many people around the table at Seder, friends, family, and military in town that had no place to go. These were my first memories of Seder, the anticipation to eat all her yummy food. But as kids, we sat there saying, is it time to eat yet? I'm hungry. How many sips of juice and gross tidbits do we have to eat before the good stuff? Parsley, yuck. Gefilte fish, yuck. But through this long Seder, that's where I got. But through this long conservative Seder, we finally got to savor the yummy food at the end and go find the afikomen. Oh, what fun it was to go to the Gross house for Passover Seders.
So similar to Margaret's story, where Margaret mentions her grandmother and then goes past her. I want to go, wait, tell me more about your grandmother. You mentioned Sylvia Gross and said that she was like this terrific person. So I want to know more about Sylvia Gross and what we call magic moments, which is really like for next week. What we call magic moments is where you say, and Sylvia Gross, I mean, you have to become Sylvia Gross for us for just a few seconds. Sort of is Sylvia Gross. Sylvia Gross was a short woman who always wore polka dotted skirts and had big lips with bright red makeup on them. And when Sylvia talked, she talked like this. In fact, Sylvia Gross sounded like her husband. I mean, it's like whatever I don't know Sylvia Gross, but Sylvia Gross becomes a sort of a caricature. And why did you like to be with Sylvia Gross? Because Sylvia Gross always sat next to me in shul and always handed me candy. And she'd say, "You want this, honey?" I mean, it's like, whatever Sylvia Gross did, when you were sick, what did Sylvia Gross? Sylvia Gross would come over.
I understand what you're saying. To me, she's like the female version of Seinfeld. I mean, she makes a lot to do about nothing and can make you laugh at everything.
Well, then you have to pull out instances of Sylvia Gross, because this story is about you and Seder, but it's a much more palpable story when we have a moment when you're sitting next to Seder with Sylvia Gross, and Sylvia Gross says, "Don't try the horseradish; it's going to burn your nostrils." I mean,
that's what she would say.
Yeah. Or Sylvia says, "Your mother's gefilte fish is terrible. Here, spit it in the napkin." I mean, it's like, Sylvia Gross becomes like your best friend at Seder. Sylvia Gross is and it's just a fabulous name. I mean, we all see, I can see Sylvia Gross. Sylvia Gross wear like cat glasses or something. So,
she's still alive. God bless her. She's still alive.
How old
That
is
woman-
Sylvia? How old is Sylvia Gross?
Has to be in her late 80s already, or maybe 90 now.
Wow.
She's hysterical. She's a pisser.
Did she smoke? She probably smoked.
Probably. But things you said were probably the things that she said that I can't remember. The things that you said about spitting something into a napkin, or that was her. The lines that came out of her mouth as a kid, for me, I laughed so hard with her.
Yeah, I mean, people, we all, as kids, we love adults who we perceive that didn't behave as adults. So my Aunt Mary is a minor character in my life, but why was Aunt Mary wonderful? Because whenever she would smile at you, she would smile and then she would roll her false teeth around in her mouth. It was like, and she did it to me. I was on the bima for my bar mitzvah and I look up and she goes, and then she's moving her teeth. I mean, it's like, so Aunt Mary was like totally crazy. I mean, she was probably like, she was really certifiably crazy, but who wouldn't love an aunt like that? Why wouldn't you want to spend time with Aunt Mary? So somebody else, let's open the door. This is fascinating. This is amazing. You guys are doing so good. Yeah, Aline. Oh, you're muted.
All of the Jewish holiday feasts, Rosh Hashanah, whatever, took place at our house, and we would have like 40 or 45 people. And there were about 10 kids, one boy, and all the rest were girls. And every single holiday, we had a Miss America pageant, the kids. And we would sit at the end of the table at Passover and wait until everything was over. And all of us would run to our rose garden. This happened at every single holiday. And Bruce Weiner, who was the only boy, had to be the judge. And all of the girls would parade around like a Miss America pageant with our clothes on and get judged. And if you think this went on year after year, and 35 years later in Santa Monica, my sister had a small Passover Seder when she was there for a year from Israel. And 3 of our friends that were of this 10 people were living out there and came. And at the end of the Seder, Bruce Weiler said, he had changed his name to Weiler at that point, said, "What about the Miss America pageant?" And my sister's children had no idea what we were talking about, but every one of us like jumped up, just like it was the natural thing to do, and started parading around for our Miss America pageant. This happened every single Jewish holiday when we were younger.
So I love that story. I mean, I don't know if you could see all of our faces as you were telling this. Everybody just went, what a fabulous story. It's an amazing.
This was like 65 years ago. I mean, women, big deal, right? But anyway.
So it's sort of like, I think that's a great kernel of a beautiful story in there. And I would ignore all the other holidays. I don't think it's germane to the story, but I would say what immediately hit me was you basically say, on Passover, we say, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different than all other nights? Or you could actually say, I'm sitting at the Seder table and we're getting ready to recite the 4 questions. And I can see the eggs and the parsley. And we sing, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different from all other nights? I bet you think it's because we're going to tell the story of Passover. Not in my family. We're going to tell the story of Miss America. I mean, and that's a great way to start a really terrific story. And then, I'm trying to think, like, how do you bring that story sort of full around? Is that there's something.
It's all about friendship. It's all about being in a small town and people growing up together and having these very serious but fun seders, but the kids doing their own thing afterward, and it being a consistent thing that we did. It wasn't like just on a whim.
So let me ask a question. Is everybody that was around that table with you, are all the kids still alive?
All but one.
Okay.
And
So
everybody talks about it every year.
and I mean, that actually can be the most poignant part of the Seder. And then somehow you move to Santa Monica. I mean, what you can do with this, with a story like this is that, when we grew up, we were here and then we moved someplace else. And even though we gathered together, we still had the Miss America pageant. And then even in Santa Monica, we had the Miss America pageant. And even though so-and-so wasn't with us, when we still walked around the table and Bruce Weiler saying, "There she is, Miss America," there she is, even, and some of the people in the story have to have some personality. And there she is, Miss America. And even though Debbie Levine died 10 years ago, we know that she is still with us at every Passover. So why is this night different from all other nights? Because even though we eat the eggs and say the blessings, we are all, we're all part of. I mean, it's a very complicated story, but it's a beautiful story. I mean, I've never heard anybody ever do that.
Well, of course, nobody ever did that, but I will tell you that we tell our children about that all the time.
So that's actually, I mean, we haven't had a chance, but that is the other message of Seder, is that's why Seder is so important, because Seder, what do we say? We say, B'chol dor vador, from every generation, we will tell the story. And I tell the story of Seder. We tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, but we also tell the story of putting on sashes, holding a bouquet, and pretending we're Miss America. I mean, it's actually a very, very beautiful story because it transcends sort of the Jewishness of the Seder, and it becomes something very American. I mean, it's a really beautiful story. I'm going to tell that story. I'm going to make that up. So we have time for one more. Yeah, Michelle, you're on mute. Yeah.
I just want to share something. Remember, I told you that my husband's family, a lot of the cousins married the Shiksas. So
Right.
One year, and I was going to write about this as being my worst, but we had, at my house, we always had Haggadahs, and we kept a whole box of Haggadahs that, we would pass around the table. So the one year, our cousin decided to do it, who's not Jewish. And so she made her own Haggadah, and it's called the Silverglade Hershey Family Haggadah. And what she did was, through the years and having Seder at my house, she was majorly into photography. So she would get up and take pictures. Sometimes I took pictures too, but she would get up and take pictures during it. So she incorporated pictures into our Haggadah of my mother-in-law, who was also like our matriarch of our family. So she incorporated all these beautiful pictures like into our Haggadah. And I think this is such a beautiful keepsake. But the only thing that, I mean, there's my son when he, got up to do Manishtana, around the table. And it just was, this is so special to keep. But when she did the Seder that year, we sat at her table and they were running it instead of my husband. And all of a sudden they brought Jesus into it. And we were like, our whole family, like my brother-in-law, my husband, myself, and my mother-in-law, all four faces went. That was the last time we did Seder at their house.
So I might leave out the Jesus part.
But I mean, that to me was like, we all were like, huh? But she made this beautiful Haggadah, and, she is very family loving or whatever, but it was a beautiful Haggadah she made and put all these beautiful pictures in, family memories into the Haggadah book. So, but the Jesus part shocked us all.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's like a whole other discussion. I'm not prepared to it's sort of like, who's the guest at the Seder this year? Jesus.
Yeah, no, it was just something I just wanted to share the Haggadah, but that was a story I was going to tell.
There is a story within the story of the Haggadah that, from every generation we tell the story, and in my family we tell this generation, and I can't, like on one foot, al-regel achat, I can't sort of come up with a story about that, but there is something, it's the kind of story where you want to share with an audience sort of the history of keepsakes or something like that. Sort of like this Kiddush cup is we use it as for Seder. It's from my bar mitzvah. The Seder plate was my grandmother's from Russia. But this Haggadah is most special. And let me tell you a story about the Haggadah and a Seder we'll never forget. So there are different ways to sort of get into that story. I think it's an interesting story, but you might sort of, I'm trying to think, like, how can you tell a story? I don't know. I mean, it's a tough story, but I love the fact that she made her own Haggadah.
Well, I just wanted to share the Haggadah part, but I got a story regarding a Kiddush cup, but that's another. We'll talk later.
So that's a great story. Kiddush cups are great. So for next week, let's all have a. Next week, I'm going to share with you. We're doing actually. I'm doing part of my show, but I've been videotaping and editing a Passover show, and I'd like to share with you one of the extended scenes from that for next week. And also, I'd love to hear sort of these opening the doors and try to help you sort of formulate a story about Passover. Passover is coming, as we all know, and I think it's on our minds, and I think it makes great storytelling. So if there are any questions, I'll be around for a few minutes and love to hear from you. But we will see you next week. This is such a great class. Thank you all for being here. It's really, really a treat. It's a treat for me to hear your stories and to I don't know. We have amazing Seder stories. It's terrific. It's really terrific. Thank you so much. Anybody has any questions? I'll be sitting here in the classroom, in the Zoom room for a few minutes.
Thank you, Cantor Evan. Great class. Thanks, everybody.